In the frozen stillness of a remote Alaskan forest, where silence wraps around the trees like a heavy winter coat and snow muffles every sound, you learn to trust your instincts more than logic. And that's exactly what 52-year-old Ray Whitaker had learned after years of living off-grid, surrounded by nothing but towering pines, frozen lakes, and the occasional moose or bear passing through. Ray wasn't the type who startled easily. But on that day, something was different. The morning had started like any other, bitter cold, with frost creeping across the inside of the windows and wind-carving patterns in the snow. Ray had just finished stacking firewood near the porch of his cabin when he heard it, something heavy trudging through the deep snow, not the usual quiet shuffle of deer hooves or the quick dash of a fox. This was heavier, slower, like something dragging itself through the storm. He turned slowly, hand tightening around the axe handle out of habit, and what he saw stopped him cold. A bear. But not just any bear. It stood at the edge of the clearing, massive, covered in ice, its thick fur matted with frost and blood. But that wasn't what made Ray's stomach drop. It was the eyes. Wild, yes, but also full of something else. Desperation. The bear didn't growl or charge. It didn't lower its head in threat. Instead, it stepped forward slowly, limping, its body shuddering from the cold. And then, it did something Ray never thought he'd see in his life. It looked straight at him and collapsed. Ray stood frozen for a moment. Every instinct in him screamed to get back in the cabin, to grab his rifle, to make sure the thing wasn't faking. But he didn't move. Something in those eyes. It hadn't been rage. It had been fear. Pain. Cautiously he approached. Each step in the snow felt heavier than the last. The bear lay motionless, its breathing shallow, steam rising in faint clouds from its body. Its paws were cracked and bleeding, one leg twisted at a strange angle. It looked starved, half dead. He couldn't explain what happened next. Maybe it was the loneliness of the forest playing tricks on him. Maybe it was the echo of his wife's voice from years ago, the one who used to stop traffic for injured squirrels. Or maybe it was just that this wasn't an animal looking to kill. It was one clinging to life. Ray turned, walked back to the cabin, and did the unthinkable. He opened the door wide and waited. The bear didn't move at first. For minutes, it just lay there, watching. Then slowly, painfully, it dragged itself across the snow, inch by inch, closer to the porch, then up the steps. Ray didn't breathe. His hand hovered near the door handle, ready to slam it shut if the animal made a move. But it didn't. It limped forward, each step a struggle, and, with what looked like a final burst of strength, the bear crossed the threshold and collapsed again. Inside, on the cabin floor, a frozen, wounded bear now lying in the warmth of his home. Ray locked eyes with it once more, and in that moment, the wild didn't feel so distant. He didn't see a monster. He saw something terrified, beaten, and barely holding on. Something that had come to him not with teeth bared, but asking for help. The warmth of the cabin clashed with the icy scent of snow and blood that clung to the bear's fur. Ray stood motionless by the door, heart pounding so hard he could hear it echoing in his ears. The bear, an animal that could crush a man in seconds, lay in the middle of his wooden floor, steam rising from its battered body as the cold began to melt from its fur. The air inside was heavy with something unspoken. Not fear exactly, but tension. Like both man and beast were trying to understand what had just happened. Ray had no idea what to do. His instincts as a survivalist screamed at him to drag the creature back outside. But another part, something quieter, older, told him not to. Maybe it was the way the bear had looked at him. Maybe it was the fact that it hadn't attacked even when it had the perfect opportunity. Or maybe it was because for the first time in years, Ray wasn't completely alone. He backed slowly into the kitchen, eyes never leaving the bear. He reached for the heavy kettle and filled it with water, placing it over the fire. Every movement was deliberate, cautious. He tried not to think about how insane this was. He had a wild predator lying next to his fireplace, bleeding on his rug, and instead of grabbing a weapon, he was boiling water. The bear groaned. A low, guttural sound, not aggressive, but exhausted. Its body twitched, and Ray caught sight of the back leg again, twisted unnaturally. A break. No doubt. How it had managed to limp through the snowstorm on that leg was a mystery in itself. But now the effort seemed to have drained the last of its strength. Its massive head dropped to the wooden floor with a soft thud, eyes fluttering closed. Ray took a deep breath, then another. He pulled open a cabinet, grabbed an old wool blanket, and, slowly, approached. The bear didn't move. Cautiously, he draped the blanket over its back. The fur was thick, but ice had frozen deep into it. He had no idea if it even helped, but it felt like the right thing to do. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He spoke aloud. "You picked the wrong guy to ask for help, big fella," he said quietly, more to himself than the creature. "But I guess we're both stuck with each other now." Nightfall came fast in the north. The wind outside howled like a pack of ghosts, snow swirling against the windows. Inside, the cabin was warm, the fire crackling low. Ray sat in his old chair with his hunting knife in his lap, not out of malice but precaution. Every few minutes he'd glance over at the bear, which remained mostly still, its breathing shallow but steady. Hours passed. Then, sometime after midnight, the silence shattered. A sharp scraping sound echoed from outside, followed by the muffled crunch of snow. Not from the bear. Something else. Ray's spine straightened instantly. He killed the fire's light, moving to the window. Outside, barely. Visible through the blowing snow were shapes, 3 of them. Moving low, silent, not wildlife, human, and they were heading straight for his cabin. Ray's blood ran cold. He grabbed his rifle from above the fireplace and checked the chamber. Loaded. The bear stirred behind him, sensing the shift in energy. Ray didn't move for a second, weighing his options. Strangers this deep in the woods were rarely friendly. Poachers, thieves, survivalists gone rogue. He didn't wait to find out. He quietly moved to the front door and stepped onto the porch, the storm lashing at his face. "Who's out there?" he called out, firm and loud. Silence. Then faintly a voice answered, slurred, male. "Didn't mean to scare you, old man. Just looking for shelter." Ray's grip on the rifle tightened. There was no innocence in that tone. Too casual, too rehearsed. He knew that kind of voice. It was the same tone used in bars just before fists flew. He took a deep breath. "Not much room in here," Ray said, loud enough for them to hear. "And I don't take kindly to uninvited guests." Another voice chimed in, younger. "Come on, we saw the light. Just let us warm up, then we'll go." Ray's eyes narrowed. There was no light. He had doused the fire, which meant they'd been watching earlier, waiting. Before he could respond, a shadow moved fast across the snow, toward the back of the cabin. Ray spun, adrenaline surging. Then, it happened. A sudden sound from inside, wood splintering, a crash. Not from the men, from the bear. Ray rushed back in just as the bear rose, limping, staggering, but alert. Its eyes wild, nostrils flaring, and for the first time, Ray realized something terrifying. The bear hadn't come to him for protection. It had come to warn him. Something worse was out there. The room felt smaller now, not because of the bear, but because of the presence outside, the weight of something unknown pressing against the wooden walls. Ray could feel it in his gut, that old instinct that had once kept him alive in places far less forgiving than the Alaskan woods. He had learned long ago that silence in the wilderness wasn't peace. It was a warning. The bear stood, hunched but alert, its head lowered and ears pointed toward the door. Despite its injured leg, There was a presence in the way it moved, calculated, controlled. Ray found himself backing toward the window, heart hammering. Whatever this animal had survived to get here, maybe it had come through worse than just the cold. Maybe it had already crossed paths with whoever was outside. Then came the sound again. A creak of snow, but this time, right beside the house. Too close. Ray didn't hesitate. He moved to the corner of the cabin where the small gun cabinet sat, quickly loading a second rifle, the one he hadn't touched in years. His breath fogged in the cold air leaking through the cabin's edges. He turned toward the bear, whose golden eyes locked with his. There was no fear in them, only urgency. "I don't know what's going on," Ray muttered, "but you and we're in this now." Suddenly, the back window shattered. Glass exploded inward as a figure in a dark coat leapt halfway into the cabin. Ray spun and fired, not at the figure but just above its head. The shot rang out like thunder, stopping the intruder mid-climb. There was a beat of frozen time. Both men staring at each other through the opening, the man's face hidden by a scarf and goggles. "Leave," Ray growled. The figure hesitated, then pulled back into the storm. Ray rushed to barricade the broken window, dragging a shelf across it, his mind racing. That wasn't a man looking for shelter. That was someone who thought this place was empty, or someone who knew it wasn't, and wanted something more than just warmth. The bear let out a low growl, its head now turned toward the fireplace. Ray followed its gaze, and that's when he noticed the trap, a small black box nestled behind a stack of firewood. Barely noticeable, until you looked close. Ray stepped forward, then froze. A blinking red light. His blood ran cold. It wasn't a trap for animals. It was a tracker. He yanked the box free and threw it into the bucket of melted snow beside the fire. The light flickered, then went dark. "They knew someone was here," Ray whispered. "They weren't just passing by. They came for something, or someone." The bear shifted again, and a sudden realization hit Ray hard. The wound on its leg, too clean to be an accident, not natural. He knelt beside the bear, careful to move slowly. As he examined the leg more closely, he saw it clearly now. A clean slice, like a blade had done it. Not claws, not ice. Human. Someone had tried to trap this bear. No, someone had tagged it, tracked it, used it. Ray stood quickly, mind connecting dots he didn't want to connect. Whatever this bear had been running from, it had led them here. And now both of them were targets. A knock at the front door jolted him back to the moment. Not a pounding, not a bang, a knock. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Ray raised the rifle and moved to the edge of the room. "You need to leave," he said loudly. "I'm armed. I don't want trouble, but I'll defend myself." A voice responded, calm, measured. "Mr. Gallagher, we're not here to hurt you. We just want what's ours." Ray's pulse spiked. They knew his name. "I don't know who you are," he called back, "but you're not taking anything from me." "You already have," the voice said. "The animal in your cabin is tagged federal property, part of a project you're not authorized to interfere with." Ray felt a strange surge of fury rise in his chest. "You hurt this animal," he said through gritted teeth. "You chased it through a storm. It came here to survive, and it's not your property. It's a living thing." A pause. Then the voice returned, colder this time. "Step aside, Mr. Gallagher, or we'll come in and take it." Inside the cabin, the bear gave a deep, guttural growl. Ray turned, seeing the creature rise to its full height, favoring its injured leg, but standing tall. There was no fear in it, only defiance. Ray looked back at the door. "You come through that door," he said, voice shaking. "And I won't be the only one defending this place." Outside, silence, then footsteps, retreating. But Ray knew it wasn't over. Not yet. He turned to the bear. They'll come back, and next time, they won't knock. The bear blinked slowly, then limped toward the center of the room and laid back down, calmer now, but alert. Ray sat beside it, rifle still in hand, watching the snow drift past the shattered window. The night wasn't over, but for now, man and beast had found something unexpected in each other. An alliance, maybe even trust. And in the frozen silence of the Alaskan woods, that might be the only thing keeping them alive. The wind howled louder that night, pressing against the cabin walls like a living thing. Every creak in the floor, every whistle through the eaves felt amplified, wrapped in tension so thick Ray could taste it. He barely slept. The bear, still recovering, but now standing and moving more fluidly, paced slowly near the front door. Ray knew the animal wasn't just reacting to pain anymore. It sensed the danger too. By dawn, Ray had boarded the broken back window, using old plywood from his shed and sealing the gaps with layers of blankets. The bear had settled near the hearth again, the firelight flickering off its deep brown coat, but its ears twitched at every sound outside. Ray brewed a pot of bitter coffee and stared out through a narrow slit in the window, waiting. They would come back, and this time, they'd be ready. Mid-morning, a snow-covered drone buzzed low over the treetops. Ray rushed outside and scanned the sky, catching the glint of its camera as it hovered, then zipped away toward the ridge. They were scouting, probably scanning heat signatures. The tracker he'd drowned might have gone dark, but that didn't mean they'd lost the trail completely. Inside, the bear watched him return, its breathing steady but eyes sharp. Ray sat beside it, and for a moment, just looked. "What did they do to you?" he murmured. The creature blinked slowly, and Ray noticed something. Beneath the thick fur, around the base of the neck, a small patch where the hair had been shaved. His stomach turned. He reached for his multi-tool and, after calming the bear with soft tones, gently parted the fur. There, embedded in the skin, was a tiny surgical implant, no bigger than a coin. Not just a tracker. This was something more. Advanced, something military-grade. He'd seen similar tech before, used in covert ops on human targets. Why was it in a bear? His thoughts raced, trying to fit the pieces together. The people who came weren't just wildlife officials. They had uniforms with no markings, vehicles, without plates. The way they spoke, the tone, the language, it was clinical. Like the bear was a failed experiment. Like they were afraid of what it might reveal. Ray backed away and sat heavily in his chair. He was no stranger to secrets. During his service, he'd guarded plenty of classified operations, some of which still haunted him. He thought those days were behind him. But this had the same stink. A sudden sound snapped him alert, a branch snapping outside. Then another. Not footsteps, tires. A slow, deliberate crunching of snow. Ray moved to the window, rifle in hand. A black SUV rolled to a stop just outside the tree line. Two men stepped out, both in gray tactical gear, one holding what looked like a tranquilizer rifle. The other carried something worse, a containment cage. Ray didn't wait. He opened the cabin door, stepped onto the porch, and raised his weapon. "That's far enough!" One of the men raised his hand in a placating gesture. "Mr. Gallagher, we don't want trouble. We just want the animal. It's not safe for you or anyone else." Ray's voice was steel. "I know what you did to it. That tracker in its neck, that's military. This isn't about safety." The man's tone shifted instantly, the mask of politeness dropping. "That bear is classified research property. Under Departmental Authorization 47B, you are now interfering with a federal operation." "Then bring a warrant," Ray shot back. "Or better yet, bring someone who still remembers what the Constitution is." The man in gray gave a thin smile. "You're making a mistake." Ray didn't lower his weapon. "So are you." For a moment, the standoff held. Then something unexpected happened. From behind the trees, a third figure appeared, a woman, tall, wearing a parka with a wildlife rehab badge. She looked out of place next to the tactical gear, but she walked, with purpose. "Enough," she said firmly, stepping between them. "Put the guns down. I'm taking custody of the bear." The lead agent scowled. "Dr. Reese, this isn't your call." "Actually," she said, producing a file from her coat, "it is. You've violated 4 environmental protection statutes, conducted illegal tagging without state oversight, and failed to file even 1 ethical review." Ray blinked, stunned. She turned to him. "I'm sorry for the trouble, Mr. Gallagher. I've been trying to shut this project down for months. They went rogue after funding was cut. That bear was part of a failed behavior modification program. Military adjacent, but never approved for field release. They used fear, pain, conditioning. It didn't work, so they tried to erase the evidence. The pieces slammed into place. The bear hadn't just been tracked, it had escaped." The man in gray spat at the snow. "This isn't over." "But Dr." Reese held her ground. "No, it's over now. Walk away." They did, but not before throwing Ray a glare that promised future consequences. Later, inside, Dr. Reese carefully approached the bear. "Easy," she whispered. "You're safe now." The bear didn't move, but it didn't growl either. She knelt beside it and examined the wound, nodding to herself. "You did good, keeping him stable. Real good." Ray exhaled for what felt like the first time all morning. "So what happens now?" She glanced at him. "We move him. To a sanctuary. Somewhere quiet. He deserves peace." Ray looked at the bear one last time and nodded. "Yeah, he does." But as she made the arrangements and the cabin grew quiet again, Ray couldn't help but feel that something deeper had shifted, not just in the bear, but in himself. Trust, once broken, is slow to return. But sometimes, it finds its way back in the most unexpected forms. And that, perhaps, was the beginning of something neither of them had seen coming. The morning after the agents left, the world outside the cabin felt somehow quieter, like the forest itself was holding its breath. A fresh coat of snow had blanketed the trees and the mountains beyond, and for the first time in days, the storm had calmed. Inside, Ray stood in the doorway, staring out at the white landscape, coffee steaming in his hand. Behind him, the bear, still weak but upright, lay on a soft bed of blankets near the fireplace. The fire crackled gently, warming the room, casting a golden glow that softened the scars etched into the animal's side. Dr. Reese had spent most of the night checking the bear's vitals, administering proper treatment, and making phone calls to secure transport. She had worked with silent urgency, hands steady, voice low. There was a stillness in her movements, the kind that came from years of working with wounded things, of seeing pain and refusing to flinch. Ray had watched her, with growing respect, realizing that she wasn't here just to clean up someone else's mess. She genuinely cared. The kind of care that ran deep and unspoken. The kind that didn't end when the bear left his front porch. "He's stabilizing," she said softly, now crouched beside the animal. That sedative wore off without any adverse reactions. "The vitals are holding steady, but he'll need rehab. Mental and physical, a lot of it," Ray nodded, though a heaviness weighed in his chest. "And you'll take him?" "We'll try," she answered, brushing her hand gently across the bear's neck. "There's a place up north. Private, protected. No experiments, no tourists. Just land. Quiet. Space to be wild again. That's the goal anyway." He glanced at the bear. Will he ever be normal? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked at Ray, her expression complicated. "I don't know what normal means anymore, but he can live, and maybe, over time, he can heal." Ray swallowed the lump rising in his throat. In his mind, he kept seeing those eyes, the moment they met his at the window, the unspoken plea. It had felt like more than survival. It had felt like trust, and in a way, like recognition. Something in that wounded animal had connected with something in him, something buried deep that he hadn't realized was still bleeding. Maybe that's what made it so hard to let go. By noon, a specialized wildlife transport truck had arrived. Discreet and quiet, parked down the slope to avoid spooking the bear. The team worked slowly and gently, guided by Dr. Reese's calm instructions. The bear didn't fight them. It didn't growl or panic. It walked into the padded transport crate with surprising grace, glancing back once toward the cabin, toward Ray as if offering a moment of acknowledgement. No sound, no roar, just that long, steady look. And Ray? He stood frozen on the porch, jaw clenched, watching the crate door swing shut. It hit him harder than he expected. The stillness left behind in the cabin felt immense. The empty space near the hearth, the lingering smell of damp fur, the broken window still boarded with old plywood, all reminders of a connection that had taken root and ended just as quickly as it began. Dr. Reese stayed behind for a few moments. She packed her gear slowly, then turned to him. "You did more than you know," she said. "Most people would have called animal control and moved on. You gave him a second chance." Ray stared at the fire, eyes distant. "I think he gave me one too." She nodded. "I believe that." Then, after a pause, she offered him a card. "If you ever want to visit, we can arrange that. Just be patient. Healing takes time." He took the card, his fingers brushing. Hers. "Thank you. For everything." After she left, the cabin was quiet again. The kind of silence that used to feel oppressive. But not now. Now it felt different. It felt earned. Weeks passed. Then months. Winter gave way to spring, and the snow melted into streams that trickled down the mountain. Life returned to the forest. Birds nested in the trees near the cabin, and small animals scurried across the underbrush. Ray kept busy fixing what the storm had broken, replacing the back window, reinforcing the shed, cleaning the old solar panels. But every so often, he found himself staring toward the trees, half expecting to see those amber eyes watching from the shadows. One day, a large envelope arrived in the mail, postmarked from upstate Montana. Inside, a photo. The bear, no longer. Thin or trembling, but standing tall beneath the shade of pine trees, coat thick and glossy, eyes bright, free. On the back of the photo, a handwritten note from Dr. Reese. He's adapting, slowly, but he's alive, and he's safe. Ray sat down on the porch with the photo in his hand. The sun was warm against his face, and a breeze carried the scent of pine and earth. He closed his eyes, holding that image like something fragile and sacred, because in a world full of noise and cruelty, sometimes salvation comes quietly, wrapped in fur, wounded, standing in your doorway in the middle of a snowstorm. Sometimes, a creature with no voice can say exactly what your soul needs to hear. And sometimes, the act of saving, another becomes the very thing that saves you.